Welcome to News Conference. California is President Obama's ATM machine. He's been at almost 15 times, almost all of them void of any public events or policy announcements. He's here to raise money. His two targets, Hollywood and Silicon Valley, two groups that do not see eye to eye on a number of key issues. Kiely is a former White House correspondent for the New York Daily News and covered Congress for USA Today. She's now managing editor of the SunlightFoundation, a nonpartisan organization dedicated to transparency in government. She joins us from Washington. Thank you for taking the time.
You're welcome.
Talk about the importance of these two regions to the Obama re-election campaign.
Well, these are two key constituencies. You've got your northern and your southern California constituencies for the president. California, as you pointed out, is always an important state in terms of the dollars for candidates. And the president has been out there numerous times to raise money. Interestingly, when he goes to California, he usually picks either the northern part of the state, focusing on Silicon Valley, as he did earlier this week, or he goes south, where he's seeing Hollywood. And as you pointed out, these are two very different constituencies that earlier this year were locked in a battle on Capitol Hill. And when President Obama came down really on the side of Silicon Valley, it looked for a while like Hollywood might turn its back on him, but nothing like that seems to have happened.
Well, it's notable that the president announced his support for same-sex marriage the day before he went to Studio City for a major fundraiser with actor George Clooney. Is there some suggestion that that timing was sort of planned? He didn't want to go into the Hollywood community on the fence on that particular issue, plus it changed the subject.
Well, I think that is a good point. It did change the subject, and I think one thing that this has done, it's unclear whether it was a deliberate timing because, as you may recall, Vice President Biden had to apologize for backing the president into a corner. But it certainly has helped the president, I think, with a constituency that might otherwise have been alienated from him, at least in terms of the studio executives. I think that's one thing we might make that distinction between the executives who are really concerned with these intellectual property issues and the artists in the industry who might have another agenda.
And getting back to SOPA and PIPA, the Stop Online Piracy Act, there are political figures in this state, Democrats, who don't even want to talk about that because they know whatever they say is going to get them in Dutch with one of the two communities. There are those within the internet community who are very much opposed to any kind of regulation.
That's absolutely right, and I think that makes a really good point. I think the internet is more than just the executives of the companies that are dominating it. And what we saw when the SOPA legislation came up on the Hill, there was just a grassroots reaction to it that was absolutely impassioned. And so I think this is going to be a real challenge for the policymakers, and I can see why California politicians don't want to talk about it. You have two communities with a lot at stake here, and both of them, interestingly, are really gearing up. One of the things we track at the SunlightFoundation is influence in politics, and that comes not just in campaign contributions, but also in lobbying expenditures. And one of the interesting things you're seeing is that these companies from Silicon Valley are starting to really ramp up their lobbying presence in Washington. And I think one reason for that is the lesson they learned from SOPA. They were outgunned on Capitol Hill, and it was this grassroots pushback that really saved their bacon on that legislation. Now I think you're starting to see, I saw this week LinkedIn on one of our trackers has just hired one of the big lobbying firms. Facebook is lobbying up. So you're really seeing these organizations come of age in terms of Washington. They may wear hoodies when they go out to talk to their investors, as Mark Zuckerberg did, but when they come to Washington, they're right in there in the Gucci Gulch.
At the same time, though, and getting to that point, you have the legacy industry that is the studio community here who believe they were bushwhacked.
Certainly in terms of lobbying presence in Washington, the Motion Picture Association and its members far outclass the internet upstarts at this point. But you're right, they did not win. Money doesn't always win in Washington. It often does. But what you saw in that fight was a big grassroots push, and politicians respond to that. So one of the things that the internet industry, the Silicon Valley companies have going in their favor is that the internet touches so many people's lives, and the people who are active on the internet are very active, very impassioned. They've become one of the more outspoken constituencies in politics, and that carries a lot of clout with politicians too.
Kathy Kiely from the Sunlight Foundation, thank you very much for joining us.
You're very welcome.